Welcome to Beans and Breakdowns, a podcast dedicated to bridging the gap between specialty coffee and the heavy music community. On this episode, I'm joined by Steven Rawles. He is the vocalist and rhythm guitarist for the band Belvedere. So grab a fresh cup of coffee and wake the fuck up. Well, what is going on, caffeinated crew? Today on the podcast, I'm joined by Steve Rawles of the band Belvedere. Steve, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm good. Nice to see you. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, of course. I'm super excited. It's awesome. The first time I've had a more West Side Canadian guest on the podcast, especially being from the band Belvedere. What are you currently drinking? Let's start it off with that.
I'm rotating. I got one in each hand here. I'm just finishing off a coffee here, and I've got a jasmine tea going for the afternoon. I got a show tonight. We're doing an acoustic show. My buddy Walt Hamburger's in town, and so I'll be playing with him tonight. And I haven't practiced or played in a couple of weeks, so I'm just I was doing a little warming up there, so I thought a tea would help that a little bit.
Heck yeah. That's a great afternoon, either doing a really interesting Ethiopian or Kenyan coffee is what I like to do, something a bit more complex. Or sometimes I'll jump on a tea like that, like a nice vanilla Earl Grey or something really soft.
We usually do we'll do 2 coffees in a day, and I generally don't like to. I get pretty jittery after 2, but we have a press here, and so we'll do one just black coffee, and then we have this sort of usually find some kind of non-dairy creamer for the second one, that extra sugar boost. That's our morning, so that usually get that. And I kind of nurse coffee too, so I can nurse it for a good hour. So.
Do you let yours cool quite a bit before you start sipping on it?
No, I jump right into it. I just, but I don't mind temperature either way, hot or cold. So I just kind of I don't mind if an hour later I've, typed 1,000 emails. I'm like, oh yeah, still drinking coffee. It doesn't matter that it's ice cold. I just keep going with it. So,
which coffee are you sipping on? Do you happen to remember?
This was some generic fair trade Costco, buy the 10-pound kind of bag. I went looking at it just about because I never know. I just kind of grab whatever and throw it in there. We usually put it in a little tin, and then just kind of go from the and then all of a sudden take the 10-pounder out, fill it up, every week, and then I don't really pay attention to what it is.
Last a couple of months there.
Yeah. Well, pinching pennies these days. A musician in this world, you have to watch your money. That's for sure.
I know how that is.
I buy a lot of things in bulk.
Because I'm dedicated to the cause, I buy a new bag of specialty coffee for each episode. And I've noticed, especially with inflation and a lot of supply chain stuff during COVID, and this is not just coffee industry by any means, the music industry, everything has felt it. But I'm drinking today a super interesting coffee. It's called Jungle is the name of the roaster. It's a small micro roaster here in town. And they have a washed Columbian geisha called Omar Tinoco Arango, which is a small farm outside of Bogota. So really, really cool. Super fruity, mango, pineapple kind of flavors. It's very, very juicy and citrusy, which is nice. Yeah. So super excited. I actually got to meet the roaster. She works for a cafe in town called Tunnel, which is also a great cafe. But super nice people running it, and the bag is really cool. It's like the Pokemon holographic cards from back in the day.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it was impossible to take a picture of.
Yeah.
So cheers to the coffee.
Cheers to the coffee and tea.
Yes. double duty over here. Do you have a local coffee shop that you like?
Yeah, our kitchen. I'll be honest, I when I go on tour, it's just whatever's there. We try to stay away. Coffee on tour is usually whatever is in front of me, and then we have sort of better coffee, for home. I always appreciate the Phil and Sebastian. That's kind of a homegrown. I mean, it's a chain. I don't want to say it's a chain because it's still just people from here, but they have a few locations. Used to be a farmer's market, and then now they've moved into Chinook Center. Those are great, and I love those coffees, but also can't always afford $4 coffees. So they're a nice treat when you can have them. There's What's another one down? Yeah, there's a whole bunch downtown that are like, even like Waves is good and stuff like that. I kind of stay away from like the bigger chains, mostly because it's not, even though it's cheap, it's garbage. I'd rather go to 7-Eleven and buy a coffee there than like from, you know, some of the other chains here, because it's just like, you know, for $1, that's decent coffee. So
yeah, it's I have friends that are on the dollar coffee, and we won't say who does the dollar coffees pretty often, but you know, I think Arabica becomes a loose term when it's that filled with cream and sugar. At some point, it's not coffee anymore.
Well, Arabica is kind of, I mean, I don't have to tell you this, you obviously know what you're talking about, but I mean, most of the world produces Arabica beans. So it's like, you know, basically, what is it? 70% of the world's beans are Arabica beans. So it's a certain elevation. It's like over 5,000 feet or something. These big beans get more resilient, I guess, you know, because they're in the more extreme climates. So, I mean, apparently they make better beans. But, I mean, yeah, McDonald's has Arabica beans. Like it's
and they proudly put it on their cup. But then it's most people don't realize Arabica is just a species of coffee plant. There's actually, I think, 4 or 5 main species of coffee plants. Arabica is the most common, and that's where you get a lot of the Central American, like Caturra, Castillo, Bourbon, all of those that are grown, like you said, really commonly are Arabica. They're super flavorful. Yeah. But then a lot of the cheaper coffees, they'll mix in Robusto, which is, like you said, a super resilient and gigantic coffee seed. And that's a bit more bitter, but if you really just roast it, it just tastes like caramel and nut and just burnt ash. But they get the roaster profile in there, and it's, like you're saying, it's just, at some point, it's just burnt.
The coffee world is very buzzwordy, right? Like, I mean, I was in Kona a bunch of years ago, and it was funny how, like, you know, you had this coffee, and we went to a couple of really great little, you know, little roasters, and you know, they were in the Kona zone, you know, so of course they have great marketing because everyone knows Kona coffee. Right. But really, like, if you go 3 miles that way, that coffee is pretty much, you know, as good. It's just not in the Kona zone, and it's, you know, the coffee world is very marketed, and you know, there's a lot of good coffee out there for sure.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that a lot of people fall prey to that kind of marketing, like the fact that Kona coffee is extremely expensive because it's grown in part of the U.S. for one. Hawaii is a very inflated area. It's really expensive to kind of produce or export or anything. And so, like you're saying, Kona is really buzzwordy, but it honestly doesn't even account. It counts for like, this is going to be wrong, but it's under 10% of all coffee production in the world, and a lot of people don't even really drink it. So I think that's pretty funny. That's a great example of the specialty coffee industry.
I was in Kauai a bunch of years ago, and they have a huge plantation there. It's like, I don't even want to throw out a number. I'll say 1 million, but that's probably too much. But like, it's an old sugarcane plantation that they've turned into this coffee farm, and it's awesome. Like, it's, you know, they do free tours and tastings and everything. And I loved all that. And we still love that kind of coffee. And like, I'm sure for people that are really into this, you know, like, oh, like that's not for me, but like, you know, we like it. And some of it's flavored coffee, and I traditionally don't love flavored coffee, but some of it's really great. And it's like, I find so much of it is like is about the experience for me. Like, I'm in Kauai, one of my favorite places in the world, and I'm having this coffee, and I'm overlooking, and there's the ocean, and this is amazing. And the coffee's 20% better because of the ocean that I'm looking at right now, right? Like,
it's about the experience, yeah. I love that you brought up Phil and Seb. I really, really have a lot of respect for what they've been able to kind of grow into without kind of attacking or trying to envelop other markets that are outside of that kind of Calgary, Alberta area. It's really, really awesome because there's a few shops here in town that sell Phil and Seb, and everything I've ever tasted from them is top notch. A couple weeks ago, I had a Kenyan coffee of theirs, and it was really good. So, I'm kind of jealous that you can just walk over to Seb and
there's one like about 5 minutes drive from here.
Yeah, they're super respected. Even in Toronto, I went to a shop, and that shop was just spewing about how much they love, you know, everybody over at Phil and Seb. So
that's so nice, because I didn't know that. Like, I didn't know that I knew that they were really well respected within this part of the world, but I didn't know that, like, I don't know their distribution channels. I don't know how far their reach is, and that's nice to hear.
They are a bit similar, I think, to 49th Parallel. I see Phil and Seb kind of as not to that level, but one of the OG kind of third wave roasters in Canada.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of tricky with that, like I do understand the sentiment behind, you don't really want the guys, the sort of the big guys coming in there. But what I've seen, because I worked in the coffee industry for a while, and what I've seen is sometimes when the big people move in, it now creates a scene, it's almost like a coffee corner. So, if it's a destination and they'll go to, Starbucks or whatever, but maybe, they get sick of Starbucks and they go next door to that indie store, and that props up the indie store. Coffee is kind of a funny thing that way. It's one of those industries where you can kind of go there and everybody gets more out of it, or maybe increases by being next to the big. Sometimes, there's some industries where you put, this restaurant beside it, it kills that indie restaurant. Right. But sometimes in that case with coffee, it now brings people who wouldn't normally go there. And I've seen that, like I worked for Starbucks for a few years when I was touring. I was just like running stores, and came in totally, green from, like an external hire, didn't know a lot about it, and kind of worked within that company. And they kind of just let me do my own thing with my stores. It was still like, the big siren, but at the same time, the people that worked above me were kind of like, this guy's having fun. He's hiring people we like. The business is good. So they just kind of let me do my thing. And that was great. And so often I would open up stores in sort of, hip indie sort of areas, sometimes really close to those stores that you talk about. And there was that pushback, you'd go out and I'm a community guy, I get this from the punk scene, right? Like I like to meet people and work together and stuff like that. And of course it's really hard to do that when you're working for, the scary machine, right? But as time went on and the pushback turned to, wow, our business is busier than it's ever been. So maybe this wasn't so bad, I hate saying that even as like, I sometimes don't even tell people that I worked for that company, but for the 4 or 5 years that I worked there, I didn't have a terrible experience.
I know a lot of people that have worked there that say the same thing. A lot of people learned a lot of things about the coffee industry. Like you're saying, it was like an introduction kind of entry level, and then you're exposed because they do have good education within that company.
Well, I mean, like, you got this. So, I'll be upfront about it. I didn't know a ton about coffee. Then I learned a shit ton about coffee, right? Because I had to be a coffee master, whatever their thing was. And I had to teach people, and I had to train people, and I had to like learn about these regions. And I did learn a lot about the business within the business. But I also did it from like my background, which was kind of this punk rock DIY attitude, so it's weird kind of meshing those two together, but I found a sweet spot. And you can kind of say the same thing about music. It's like, maybe you started out with that and that wasn't so cool, but like you morphed into something cooler. Maybe that took you down a really great path of independence and different kinds of coffee and everything. And same thing with music. I mean, maybe people got into punk with The Offspring and Green Day in '94, but then they learned all these other bands because of that. And so is that a bad, I don't know, it's a big conversation. I'm sure whatever I say will be wrong. So
no, I definitely appreciate that mindset, because I'm very much a DIY person. And just hearing you be involved with that, but from that mindset, it's just such a different perspective than what I've kind of talked to people about. So I really do appreciate that being kind of where you were at. It's really cool to hear that, honestly.
Well, I remember what punk rock was like in the early 90s, and I went to shows and it was really scary and not many people would go. And if you did, it was sometimes, you'd get your ass kicked, like, but it was a different scene. And then when 93, 94, 95 kind of happened, these bigger bands kind of came in, it opened up the scope. Now, sometimes you get the idiots that you wanted to, you went to shows to get away from those people. Now all of a sudden they're coming to watch NoFX and stuff. But you find that sort of sweet spot. You find your good people there, and these people that are great people. And a big part of my life now will go, well, I never would have heard of punk. There was no punk in my town or my whatever. But those bands being on the radio and stuff like that exposed me to something that I wouldn't have been exposed to before. So, I try to look at the best of, in most things. I try to look positively on most things. And if it brought good people into the scene and they went off and did something really cool, then I guess that's okay.
Yeah. And that's what I say about Starbucks is we wouldn't have like the third wave scene in the US that we had without all of Starbucks kind of baristas introducing a lot of people to what that even title that meant, like what barista title meant was that you're preparing coffee, you're welcoming people, you're a part of that community?
There was like we have a chain up here called Jugo Juice, and I went to school with one of the owners, like we're in junior high or something, and he was a Starbucks store manager. Him and his partner, that's where they met, and then they formed and started off. They've now sold off the company and stuff, but they totally made this whole like little wrap like smoothie place, that like branched out how many locations across Canada. And I'm like, well, you started the same place that a lot of people started at, and it may be the big scary US company, but at least it brought you together.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Keeping on this topic of coffee, Slaves to the Grind.
Yeah.
You guys released the blend with Hindsight is the 6th with Anarchy Coffee. Mm-hmm. I've recently been introduced to Anarchy Coffee. I've been talking a little bit with Jesse. Mm-hmm. How did you and Anarchy kind of form this relationship to create this?
I don't remember how we first started chatting. I think I started talking to Jesse on Instagram or something, and they were fans of the band and sent me some samples of this coffee, and I was like, this would be super cool. We have this record coming out. This would be super cool to do like our own blend, find something. And so he sent me a few different samples, and I just love this sort of fair trade Ethiopian coffee that just really resonated with me. And it just has like such a great like fruit taste to it. And a lot of like African coffees that I enjoy are fairly dark roast coffees, but given the region that they're grown in, there's a lot of fruit nearby, and they pick up a lot of those notes. So you get that kind of grapefruit. It's like, there's a lot of Kenyan coffees that I like drink black coffee, with it, but you can pair it with a grapefruit and it's like amazing, and you don't have to put anything in it. It's just like the way it is great. And, they use like the dry method where the grape actually is, burned onto it essentially under the sun. It's not washed off through other methods. And coffee turned out great. It's just like, and every little like sample he sent was just a little bit different. He was trying out these, this is how much it's roasted at this time. This is what it tastes like when it's roasted this time. Found his sweet spot. I was like, do it, wrap it up. And they made, I think, like 100 pounds of it or whatever. And so like some got shipped to our label, and we sold some, and they sold some, and like it was super fun. And when we did the record, we have like a Belvedere beer here in Alberta through the High River Brewery, and we've got this, and tried to do hot sauce, but it didn't work out. There's like too much going on, but super fun to do.
Yeah, it was really cool seeing a lot of bands, and especially like kind of underground. Anarchy's not the biggest roastery. They have a few blends that they regularly do. I just thought it was really cool that you guys worked with such a small kind of independent roastery, not even from, Alberta, but that are kind of getting their legs and just doing the farmer's market kind of tour. It seemed like
we're a small really independent band, so it seemed to really line up pretty good. So,
and I was kind of interested because you guys had worked with Grizzler on a tour y'all did a few years ago with, wasn't it Satanic Surfers and La Armada?
Yeah, that was like 4 or 5 years ago. I think we did Surfers because I did the tour managing with them and booked that tour. It was across Canada, and then La Armada joined for Ontario and Quebec. And that was a fun time.
So working with because I know the Grizzlers Edmonton, were they just giving y'all kind of coffee for the tour and y'all were selling it, or?
No, I don't think we sold it. I think we just got some, and that was like, we just kind of do these little sponsorship things, it's just like stick your name on a thing, have some free coffee, everybody's happy. Mm-hmm. My buddy John in Edmonton hooked that up, and I think we did some like band shoes and stuff like that too. And
cool. Yep. I'm a fan of the Grizzler just because they do the roasting for Satanic Coffee Company. That's also Pitch Black North. He is based in Calgary.
Okay.
He has like a metal themed tea blending company, and also does coffee roasting with their Grizzlers. So that's really cool. A lot of cool stuff happening over in West Canada. Yeah.
It's, I don't know, it's fun. There's lots of stuff that's always going on, but like if you can do that, I mean, especially in the last 2 years, there's been that opportunity to take a step back from what's going on and find these fun collaborations, whether it be like product like coffee, or I do a lot of like online stuff. sing with other, musicians and stuff like that and do fun songs. Like me and Roger from Less Than Jake did a thing there with some other people. And I love all that stuff. And like, I think in the last 2 years, it's been a good opportunity to sort of dabble in other things that maybe you wouldn't normally have time for.
Definitely. It's given us a lot of time to reflect and gain kind of some perspective on what makes us happy, kind of what do we find worth spending time on, which is something that I would really love to talk to you about. I've heard you speak about it before. Belvedere, you guys were 94 was the first release, right?
95 we started. I think we did our first, 96 we released a compilation. I had a record label back then, so we were one of 4 bands that we did some stuff on. And then first album came out in 98.
And then so from 95 to 2005, y'all were going kind of broke up or hiatus and then came back in 2012.
Yeah, we went pretty hard right up until 2005. And then I had another band called This Is a Standoff. We did that from 05 to 2012, 2011. And I got back at it with Belvedere, and it's been 10 years now since we came back together.
Which that's really cool. And I know for you in this kind of coming back in 2012 and especially now touring, being, more mature and being in the band after, I guess it's 15 years combined or 20 years combined.
Well, older, not probably more mature, but yeah, definitely older.
But just knowing kind of your limits now, and I've heard you talk about knowing when to take a break. How has touring for you changed as opposed to that first kind of 95 to 2005 going at it like grinding? And then now what are some adjustments that you have made to make sure that you don't really burn out or, go crazy on tour?
It's funny that you asked that, because right now I'm not taking a break. I'm going harder than I ever have, not only with Belvedere, but with the other 20 bands that I book. Mm-hmm. As a booking agent, you kind of keep rolling these tours over and like booking new dates, kind of going, some of this will hopefully happen, probably not. Nobody knew, right? So now everything's happening at the same time, and I barely have time for anything. I need to listen to what I was saying in another interview talking about making time for myself and actually do it, because I'm not really doing it right now. But I figure by the middle of September, things will have kind of calmed down. Everybody in the industry is feeling this right now. It's this mix of like, things are crazy because, as you see, tours are still canceling for different reasons. Now it's not just, bands are getting sick and stuff like that. So like tours and shows are canceling. So that's a whole logistical nightmare. And at the same time, everybody's touring at the same time because you want to get back out there. And so it's kind of wild right now, to be honest. It's unknown territory for a lot of people. And I'm sure people are losing a lot of sleep right now.
Yeah. It's almost like because things have reopened up, and I've kind of felt this way too. It's like everything they turned the spigot on all the way. And so it's like a fire hose. Everything just started coming back all at the same time.
Yeah, like there's shows every day. So, people have been hit financially, so you can't go out to all these shows. People are still nervous to go out to shows, which I get too. Everybody's touring at the same time, and gas is double and van rentals are double. And it's like flights are crazy. And it's like, I now see why bands are canceling their European tours. Like, we can't financially do this, because it's just not possible. We're just going to take a hit. And for bands to say that after 2 years of not doing anything, it's like you can't now all of a sudden take a huge hit either. So it's tricky. I'm just trying to put my head down and just get through everything. Just, I've got probably 300 shows in the books between all the bands, and we've probably gotten through about 100 right now. So I got a lot of stuff coming up for sure this summer.
Yeah, that's quite a summer there. You running merit-based booking, I know you're seeing firsthand the ebb and flow of the industry and this post-COVID kind of change in industry. Aside from like the price hikes, because it seems like, oil's gone up, like you're saying, van rental airfare has gone through the roof now. Yeah. What are some trends that you're kind of seeing in terms of like even turnout? Because here for a while we were having huge turnouts because people didn't know when Quebec was going to close back down. But now that we've lost our mask mandate, everything is basically back to quote unquote normal, as I'll do. are you still seeing that same post-COVID turnout at a lot of these shows, or how are things looking?
I think some tours are doing really well and some are not. I'm not going to get into like specifics, but like you're starting to see like those sort of bigger tours that you think were too big to fail, kind of saying like, hey, pick up some tickets for this. Like, wow, it's not sold out yet. Like, bring your friends. It's like, holy smokes. Like, so you are seeing it at that level, and you're seeing it at our level. And, we're, for whatever reason, it's tricky right now. Because like I mentioned before, like people have all these tickets sitting on their fridge right now. And it's like, do I need to go and buy, other pre-sale tickets, So every country is dealing with things differently right now. And I know, given what I've seen online from certain bands that have had to pull the plug on things because they just can't risk it. It's a challenging time. You can look at it as it's not as good as it was 3 years ago, or you can look at it as, hey, this is awesome that I still get to play music. We're going to make this work no matter what. And that's where that's where I am with everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, look at, I don't really care about, a year and a half ago, I was sitting on my couch. So the fact that I get to go out and play for people is what's really important. And, these bigger outdoor festivals are still doing pretty good because I think people feel kind of safe there, or they're going to buy tickets. That's what they're putting their money towards, so they can see a lot of bands. But, there's some shows that are still killing it. I've seen lots of hardcore and punk and shows that are metal shows that are like selling out every night. So, it's not a cakewalk for everybody. It's still hard. And every day you see it too. Like, I talk to a lot of bands and, they're like, it sucks that I can't go out into the crowd and talk to people afterwards. It's like, it's not that I'm per se worried, but at the same time, if one person gets sick, it's like, now that puts you in a bad spot. Now you have to make a decision, Yeah. You now have to, someone's sick, you have to test and all that stuff that goes with it. And as soon as you do that, then, and you see it, right? Like from all the way the biggest bands, like we've got to shut down for 5 days for whatever. And you think of the thousands of dollars that everyone loses from that stuff. It's not always about money, but when this is your job and you're 10 grand in the hole for flights, it gets pretty scary when all of a sudden you got to cancel 5 shows.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of really sad to see, because we were waiting for so long for touring to come back. And then even earlier, a couple months ago, we had some shows, and I think maybe the week before or even a couple of days before, they get canned. Yeah. And then, you get the notification on your email, you've been refunded. It's like, damn, what happened? Yep. Check the Instagram and somebody's got sick on the tour. Somebody lost their passport. Like a lot of people have gotten bags stolen recently where they'll lose passports because crime in certain cities has really been kind of skyrocketing. So it's really sad to see a lot of this stuff, but I'm happy to see things are balancing out maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I know about punk bands is that like if you've been sort of on the road for quite a long time, you've learned how to adapt to ever-changing situations. And that's what bands are doing right now. They're just trying to do whatever they can to get out there and play. And, it's not for everybody right now, but I applaud the ones that are trying to make it work, and the people that go to the shows. It's much appreciated that they, it's not for everyone to go to shows right now. Some people probably can't, for whatever reason. And so, I just feel lucky that we can get out there and play and do our thing. But to your point, like we were in Europe and we had to sit in Munich for 5 days because some people got sick, and, it was a logistical nightmare. I'll leave it at that.
Stranded in Munich. Another kind of observation I've just been seeing, going back to some shows and seeing the lineups and things like that, in terms of like local younger bands, I'm not seeing a lot of activity and a lot of I was expecting to see a lot of bands coming out of kind of the 2-year shutdown where maybe high schoolers or kind of younger kids got into hardcore online or into like punk or anything, and now they want to play. But I'm just not seeing. Maybe it's the opportunity is not there, or maybe it's not that. Are you seeing this as well? Is it like people are more into the bands that are established that they were wanting to see before the pandemic, and there's just not that spot for those bands to come through?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know what the answer is to that. I mean, quite often when we're booking shows, people suggest these bands and to open, and I'm always like, yeah, I'll check them out. They sound good. If you think, they'd be good for the show, let's do it. that's usually the end of the conversation, like unless there's some big red flag, it's like, okay, sure. If they want to do it and they think they'll bring some people and they're awesome, let's do it. I lean so often on our local promoters because they know their markets better than I would know. I can't know, right, who's the it band in 500 cities across the world. So you lean on the promoters that because, you want to have the best show possible for everyone. Yeah, I mean, maybe because there is so many touring bands out there now that is taking the spot for some of those local bands, and they certainly have my sympathy. I've been that local band trying to get on anything I could possible, and still hit up agents and bands. Hey, can we do these tours or whatever? So, but I don't know. I don't know if it's a matter of opportunity or maybe people were doing other things, during this lockdown. I think there's that sort of pressure that because you're a musician that, why didn't you crank out 3 albums over this last 2 years? Because there's, mentally you weren't in the right spot to do right. something like that. Or you just, you found another passion, or your family was first and you just didn't have that big, creative boost that you thought maybe you did. I mean, we did a lot of stuff. Like we cranked out an album. I did a bunch of touring and booking and stuff. And I still don't feel like I took advantage of the time that I did. My whole thing was spending time with my kid.
I mean, that's important though. Yeah. Extremely important.
That's right. It's not, my whole life isn't just writing records and
right.
playing shows.
Yeah. And I definitely know what you're saying, because even being in the event industry, having to kind of change and adjust industries for a while was like, am I ever going to do this again? Like, am I ever going to, I know for a lot of musicians, it was like, are we ever going to tour? Or is it going to be Twitch streams or, Instagram Live? Like,
I've seen bands had to put things on hold now because one person went to school. He's like, they said, I can't sit around here anymore waiting for stuff to happen. Stuff keeps canceling for whatever reason. I got to go pursue my, my master's or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, now you're sitting on hold for another couple of years. So that's his life, man. It's just the way it's going. And one thing I've learned over this couple of years is just to roll with stuff. Don't get too invested in, don't beat yourself up. I beat myself up a lot about a lot of things that, if I can't do things as well as I did a couple of years ago because of brain fog or whatever else, or there's too many things coming at you all day, just do your best and just try to enjoy what you're doing. Because if you don't enjoy it, then what are you doing all this stuff for?
Yeah. I mean, if the pandemic taught us anything, it's don't waste your time on things that aren't bringing you some kind of joy or fulfillment or health like benefit.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely. And I know that you guys last year in the summer released Hindsight is the Sixth Sense. Mm-hmm. Sixth Sense. Can't speak with my tongue today. Hindsight is the Sixth Sense.
You got it.
Yes. And it's really great listening to that and then going back through the catalog, and kind of the sound is still the same, very melodic hardcore. It reminds me so much of that I just talked to the dudes from Ignite, about a month ago. And it's very much in that same vein, like skater punk with like breakdowns. I can count so many bands that are influenced directly, I know, from Belvedere and from bands like Ignite and things like that. So it's so fun to listen to and drive. It makes me want to drive really fast.
Yeah.
But I know that you had some tours you had to kind of adjust, and you're booking for other bands. What are the plans for Belvedere specifically through the fall?
So, I'm leaving in 3 days to go do a little run with Pouzza. So we play Pouzza. I'm actually going 2 days early because I'm going to help the Last Gang with their couple of shows in Toronto and Barrie. And then we both go to Montreal, and we come all the way back and do St. Catharines and London. And then we go home after that. Home for a day. I fly to Vancouver, and then I start the No Fun at All Satanic Surfers Tour. We go across Canada for 2 weeks, and that ends at Redbridge Festival. And then I'm home for, I think, a couple of weeks, and then I do a couple of Saskatchewan dates with Belvedere, and then we go to Europe. We have 2 tours in Europe. They're each about 2.5, 3 weeks. And then I'm back for that, and then I do, it's not announced yet, but there'll be some stuff in Ontario and Quebec there in September. And that's kind of where my touring stuff ends. We're going to start doing more overseas stuff in 2023. We have some US plans and some hopefully Japan and Australia and Mexico and stuff like that. But the places where this last year has mostly just been like makeups in Europe and Canada, the stuff that from 2020.
Right.
While all this is going on, I've got like 10 Europe tours going for like Cigar and The Last Gang and Satanic Surfers and Veneria and Adrenalize, Downway, Chaser, Useless ID, Straight Line, Drunk Tank, Darko. There's a lot. One Hidden Frame. I don't want to forget anybody.
Yeah. That's nonstop like that. I can't even wrap my mind around having to focus on that and tour and sing.
I need an assistant. So if you know anybody who wants to get into the industry or already knows what they're doing, I'd love to offload a bunch of stuff to them. But I'll get through it. I'll get through this to the fall, and then we'll see where things go from there.
Yeah. I was super excited because Pouzza, there's a band that's playing that I haven't seen in a long time that I really love, called Bad Luck. They're originally from Florida and relocated to New York. I haven't seen them in over 10 years when my band in Savannah opened for them. Cool. And then Cancer Bats, of course, who wouldn't want to see Cancer Bats? And then seeing Belvedere and Brutal Youth, awesome Toronto band.
Know them well. They're good friends.
It is the weekend that my family is coming in town for the first time in 3 years. So it's
right.
That sucks.
How far do you live from the venues?
Not far. I literally live maybe a 10-minute walk to Foof's, a 7-minute or less walk to Turbo House.
So you can have family dinner, and then it's when it's coffee time and dessert, you'd be like, okay.
That's what I've been thinking about.
At 6 p.m., I'll be back in an hour.
So I might take my family on a stroll past the barbecue and be like, oh, look, there's some live music out here.
Yeah, what's this? Oh, I have to have tickets for it. I'll be back in 20 minutes.
Yeah, and and it sucks because I've made so many friends now that are going to be, they're like, we'll see you at Pouzza. It's I'm going to try my best, but I can't make any promises. The dudes in Boundaries, such nice dudes. So
Pouzza's fun, man. It'll be a good time. I'm looking forward to finally getting this done for sure.
Yeah. 2 years without it. I know that the crowd, it's like a cult almost. Everybody kind of goes it's like a fam. I shouldn't say cult. I should say family. It's like a family.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's such a cool festival. Cool, still DIY indie, to the roots festival.
We'll try to sneak out at 1 a.m. That's when we're playing at Fufun. So we're closing down the big room there.
It's on Sunday, right? That y'all are doing
We're on Friday.
And then Sunday is Cancer Bats. That's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
May have to come up with some weird excuse. 1 a.m. is pretty late. I think I might be able to do it.
Yeah, you should be able to get the family will be in bed by then.
Yeah.
So you see us, and then you'll see the Last Gang that are in the room right beside us in Fufun. So.
Oh yeah, the little garage.
Yeah.
That's a cool room. I love that room. I actually think I like it more than the cabaret.
Yeah.
Because you can stage dive easier.
Yeah. The other one's it's a tall stage.
It's a bit awkward. You're looking up the whole time.
Yeah. I have to bounce. I just realized what time it is. I have to go down and do a show.
Can I give you one last question before we go?
Yeah, sure. Yep.
What's your favorite city for Beans and Breakdowns?
Montreal, dude.
That's it.
Where else can you get pizza, poutine, Pouzza, coffee, and punk rock bands?
That's right.
Not to that level.
Home of Foofs and Bell Pro. That's all you need. Well, Steve, thank you so much. I know you got to run. This has been such a fun time, and I really hope that I can catch up with you at some point when you're in Montreal. Even if I don't get the set, I'll shoot you a message.
That sounds great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Have a good day.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beans and Breakdowns. I want to say a huge thanks to Steve for hanging out on the podcast. Be sure to check out Hindsight is the New Sixth Sense, available on all listening platforms, and check out Belvedere on tour. They have a lot of dates in North America and over in Europe, so check them out. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review. You can also find out more information about the podcast by following us on Instagram at Beans and Breakdowns and on the web at beansandbreakdowns.com. Until next week, stay caffeinated and wake the fuck up!